The bridge of the Valiant was silent except for the steady hum of the ship's systems. Captain Jake Morrison stood with his hands behind his back, staring at the main view screen that showed nothing but empty space and distant stars. His crew waited at their stations, fingers hovering over controls, hearts pounding in their chests. They all knew what was coming. They all knew this moment would change everything. Jake was 42 years old, with gray starting to show in his dark hair. He had spent 20 years in Earth's defense fleet, working his way up from a junior officer to commanding the most powerful warship humanity had ever built. The Valiant was 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that the galaxy had never seen before. But weapons alone wouldn't win this fight. Jake knew that. What they needed now was courage and the willingness to follow through on a promise that terrified even him. Behind him, Lieutenant Amy Carter sat at the communications station. She was 28, bright and dedicated, and she had been with Jake for 5 years. Her fingers moved across her console, preparing to broadcast the message that would either save humanity or doom it. She glanced up at Jake, waiting for his signal. "Are we ready, Lieutenant?" Jake asked without turning around. "Yes, sir. All channels are open. Every ship, every station, every world in the Galactic Empire will receive this message simultaneously," Amy replied. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the tension underneath. Jake took a deep breath. Behind him, Chief Engineer Greg Turner watched from the engineering station. Greg was 50, stocky and practical, with hands that could fix anything mechanical. He had built half the systems on this ship himself. Next to him stood Dr. Lisa Grant, the chief scientist who had designed the weapons that made this confrontation possible. Lisa was in her late 30s, thin and intense, with eyes that always seemed to be calculating something. She had spent 3 years developing technology that broke every rule the Empire thought they knew about warfare. "Send it," Jake said. Amy pressed a button. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds and millions of ships, screens flickered to life. High Chancellor Vorketh of the Galactic Empire was in his throne room when the message arrived. He was a tall creature with 4 arms and scales that shimmered purple under the lights. He had ruled the Empire for 30 years and considered himself untouchable. Around him stood his advisors, representatives of the 15 species that made up the Empire's ruling council. Jake's face appeared on screens everywhere. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human warship Valiant, representing Earth and all human colonies. For 2 years, the Galactic Empire has invaded our space, attacked our worlds, and enslaved our people. You have treated us as primitives, as insects beneath your notice. We have asked for peace. We have offered diplomacy. You have answered with violence and contempt." On Vornathal, the Empire's throne world, Vorketh leaned forward on his throne. His advisors whispered among themselves, amused that the humans dared to address them so directly. Humans were newcomers to the galaxy. Barely 200 years since their first faster-than-light flight, they had no significant military power, no advanced technology, nothing that could threaten an empire that had ruled for 3,000 years. Jake continued, "This is your final warning. You have 72 hours to withdraw all military forces from human territory and release all human prisoners. 72 hours to cease all hostile actions and enter into genuine peace negotiations. If you do not comply, we will consider ourselves at war, and we will not stop until your empire is ashes." Vorketh laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that echoed through his throne room. His advisors joined in. The idea that humans could threaten them was absurd. Humans had maybe 1,000 ships scattered across their little corner of space. The Empire had millions. Humans had colonies on 20 worlds. The Empire ruled 15,000 systems. The High Chancellor gestured, and his own image appeared on broadcast channels, overriding Jake's message. "Humans," Vorketh said, his voice dripping with amusement. "You are children playing at war. Your threats are meaningless. Your technology is primitive. Your fleets are toys. We will crush your Earth within 1 cycle of your sun, and your species will serve the Empire as the slaves you were always meant to be. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. Prepare for extinction." The transmission ended. On the bridge of the Valiant, the crew watched in silence. Some looked angry. Some looked scared. Jake felt both emotions churning in his gut, but he kept his face calm. He had expected this response. They all had. "Well," Greg said from the engineering station, "I guess that's that. Timer starts now," Amy said quietly, marking the exact moment the deadline began. 72 hours until humanity either won the right to exist or lost everything. Jake turned to face his crew. He saw Lieutenant Chris Morgan at the intelligence station, a quiet man in his 30s who had been tracking Empire movements for months. He saw Commander Ryan Phillips, his second-in-command, a veteran of a dozen border skirmishes with Empire patrol ships. He saw young Ensign Katie Brooks at the weapons console, barely 25, who had graduated top of her class and volunteered for this mission knowing she might not survive it. "Listen up," Jake said. His voice carried authority but also something else, respect for every person on this bridge. "The Empire thinks we're bluffing. They think we're weak. They've spent 3,000 years being the strongest power in the galaxy, and they can't imagine anything different. That's their weakness. They've never faced an enemy that fights like we do." Lisa Grant stepped forward. "Captain Morrison is right. The Empire relies on energy weapons and plasma cannons. Their shields are designed to deflect particle beams. They've never encountered kinetic weapons fired at relativistic speeds. They've never seen swarm missile technology, and they definitely don't know about the Xenon Protocol. What they don't know will kill them," Greg added grimly. Jake nodded. "Our orders are clear. If the Empire doesn't withdraw, we hit them hard and fast. We show them exactly what human weapons can do. We make them regret ever threatening Earth." He paused, looking at each face on the bridge. "But I need you all to understand something. Once we start this, there's no going back. We won't be fighting a border skirmish. We'll be fighting for the survival of our species. Some of us won't make it home. Maybe none of us will." "We knew that when we volunteered, sir," Ryan said. The others nodded. Back on Earth, Admiral Kevin Hayes sat in the command center of Earth's Defense Headquarters. He was 60 years old with white hair and a face lined by decades of service. Around him, dozens of officers monitored screens showing the positions of every human ship, every colony, every defense platform. They were watching the Empire's response, tracking their fleet movements, preparing for war. "The Empire is mobilizing," one officer reported. "We're seeing increased activity in 6 sectors. They're pulling ships from patrol routes and concentrating forces." Kevin nodded slowly. He had known Jake Morrison for 15 years, had personally selected him to command the Valiant. He trusted Jake's judgment completely, but he also knew what this war would cost. Earth had a population of 11 billion people. The colonies added another 2 billion. Against the Empire's trillions, humanity was outnumbered in ways that made conventional warfare impossible. That was why they had spent 3 years building weapons in secret. That was why Dr. Lisa Grant's research had received unlimited funding. That was why every resource Earth could spare had gone into developing technology that would shock the galaxy. Humanity couldn't match the Empire in numbers or resources, but they could match them in innovation, in desperation, and in the willingness to do whatever it took to survive. "Send a message to all human colonies," Kevin ordered. "Begin evacuation procedures for non-essential personnel. Get civilians into shelters. Activate all defense platforms," he paused, "and pray the Empire sees reason before the 72 hours are up." But deep down, Kevin knew they wouldn't. The Empire was too arrogant, too confident, too blind to see the threat humanity represented. In 72 hours, the galaxy would learn a truth that humanity had known since its earliest days. Sometimes the smallest fighter is the most dangerous, especially when they have nothing left to lose. On the Valiant, Jake returned to his quarters for a few hours of rest before the deadline expired. He sat at his desk and recorded a message to his sister back on Earth, knowing she might never receive it. He told her he was doing his duty. He told her he loved her. He didn't tell her he was terrified. The countdown continued. 71 hours. 70 hours. 69 hours. The Empire's fleets moved into position. Human ships prepared their weapons. And in laboratories across human space, scientists made final checks on systems that would change warfare forever. The warning had been delivered. The Empire had responded with contempt. Now there was nothing left but to wait and see if humanity's final gamble would pay off, or if Earth's last message to the galaxy would be a scream of extinction. The 72 hours passed in agonizing slowness. On the bridge of the Valiant, Jake Morrison watched the countdown timer tick toward 0. His crew had barely slept. They had run combat drills, checked every system 3 times, and waited for the Empire to blink. But the Empire's fleets remained in position, their ships still deep in human territory. Their weapons still pointed at human worlds. With 5 minutes left on the countdown, Lieutenant Amy Carter looked up from her station. "Sir, we're receiving reports from New Portland Colony. Multiple Imperial warships have entered orbit. They're broadcasting a demand for immediate surrender." Jake's jaw tightened. New Portland was home to 3 million people, mostly farmers and scientists working on terraforming projects. It had no military defenses beyond basic patrol ships. The Empire had chosen it specifically because it was vulnerable. "Are they attacking?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. Amy's face went pale as she read her screen. "Yes, sir. Orbital bombardment has begun. They're targeting population centers." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Thousands were dying right now, maybe tens of thousands. The Empire wasn't just refusing the ultimatum. They were sending a message written in human blood. Jake's hands curled into fists. He had hoped against all logic and experience that the Empire might choose peace. But hope was a luxury they couldn't afford anymore. He reached for the command console and entered his authorization code. A red light began flashing across every station. "This is Captain Morrison," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the ship. "We are now at war. All hands to battle stations. Prepare for immediate jump to the Korvath system." Commander Ryan Phillips turned from his station. "Korvath, sir?" "That's their nearest military hub. They have over 200 ships stationed there." "I know exactly what they have there," Jake replied. "That's why we're going. Amy, send a priority message to Admiral Hayes. Tell him the Empire fired first. Tell him New Portland is under attack. And tell him we're executing Operation Hellfire." On Earth, Admiral Kevin Hayes received the message in the middle of the night. He had been trying to sleep but knew it was pointless. When his aide woke him with the news from New Portland, something cold and hard settled in his chest. He walked to the command center still in his uniform, having never actually changed out of it. "Confirm the report," Kevin ordered. "I need to know exactly what's happening at New Portland." The intelligence officer pulled up satellite feeds. The images showed cities burning, shields collapsing under sustained fire, evacuation ships trying desperately to flee the planet. The death toll was climbing by the minute. Kevin closed his eyes for just a moment. Then he opened them and began giving orders. "Send authorization codes to all fleet commanders. Rules of engagement are now unrestricted. No mercy, no prisoners. The Empire wants war. We'll give them war they'll never forget." He paused. "And activate the Xenon Protocol authorization. If this is what they want, we'll show them what humanity is truly capable of." The Valiant arrived at the Korvath system in a flash of twisted space. One moment they were light years away. The next they were dropping out of faster-than-light travel right in the middle of the Imperial fleet's defensive perimeter. Alarms shrieked across every Imperial ship as sensors detected the human vessel. On the bridge, Ensign Katie Brooks had her hands on the weapons console. She had trained for this moment but never truly believed it would come. Now she was about to kill, about to end lives, and the reality of it made her hands shake. "Steady, Katie," Jake said quietly. "Remember your training. Remember what they did to New Portland." Katie took a breath and steadied her hands. "Weapons ready, sir." "Target the cruiser formation on our port side," Jake ordered. "Fire when ready." Katie pressed the firing controls. The Valiant's railguns spat out projectiles accelerated to 30% of light speed. These weren't energy weapons that shields could deflect. These were solid slugs of dense metal moving so fast they hit like miniature suns. The first Imperial cruiser never knew what hit it. The railgun round punched through its hull, through its reactor and out the other side in less than a millisecond. The ship exploded in a ball of white-hot plasma. The second cruiser tried to raise shields, but shields meant to stop energy weapons were useless against kinetic projectiles. It died just as fast. "Multiple targets locking onto us," Lieutenant Chris Morgan reported from intelligence. "They're trying to return fire." "Evasive maneuvers," Ryan Phillips ordered. "Don't give them a stationary target." The Valiant was fast, faster than any Imperial ship its size. Human engineers had sacrificed armor for speed, betting that not getting hit was better than absorbing damage. The ship twisted and turned through space as plasma bolts and particle beams lanced through where it had been moments before. "Launch swarm missiles," Jake ordered. "All tubes." Greg Turner had designed the swarm missile system himself. Instead of one big explosive, each missile carried 100 smaller warheads that separated on approach. Each warhead had its own guidance system and could adjust course independently. The result was a cloud of death that was almost impossible to shoot down completely. 300 missiles streaked away from the Valiant, then separated into 30,000 individual warheads. The Imperial ships activated their point defense systems, shooting down hundreds of the incoming projectiles. But there were too many. Thousands got through. Explosions rippled across Imperial hulls, tearing through armor, rupturing fuel lines, destroying weapon systems. Enemy formation is breaking apart, Chris reported. They're trying to scatter. Don't let them, Jake said. Target priority vessels. Take out their command ships first. For 3 hours the battle raged. The Valiant was joined by 5 other human warships that jumped in to support her. Together they moved through the Imperial fleet like wolves through sheep. Every weapon humanity had developed in secret was unleashed. Railguns tore ships in half. Swarm missiles overwhelmed defenses. Plasma torpedoes melted through hulls. The Empire tried to adapt, tried to coordinate their superior numbers, but they had never faced enemies who fought like this. Their tactics were based on 3,000 years of fighting enemies who used the same technology they did. Humans fought differently. They used speed instead of strength. They used precision instead of overwhelming force. They targeted weak points and exploited them ruthlessly. Dr. Lisa Grant watched the battle from her station, monitoring the effectiveness of each weapon system. She made notes, adjusted parameters, sent updates to the weapon systems in real time. She had designed these weapons to kill, and now she watched them do exactly that. Part of her felt sick. Another part felt grimly satisfied. The Empire had forced this fight. Let them learn the cost. When it was over, the Korvath system was a graveyard. Over 200 Imperial ships were destroyed or disabled. The human fleet had lost 1 destroyer and suffered moderate damage to 2 frigates. It wasn't even close to a fair fight. Amy, open a broadcast on all Imperial channels, Jake ordered. I want every ship, every station, every world to see this. Amy's hands shook slightly as she activated the broadcast. Cameras on the Valiant's hull showed the debris field stretching for thousands of kilometers, the burning wrecks of what had been the Empire's proud Third Fleet. Jake stared into the camera. His face was hard, showing no triumph, no joy in the destruction. This is Captain Jake Morrison. What you see here is the result of attacking human civilians. This is what happens when you ignore our warnings. This is the price of your arrogance. He paused. And this is only the beginning. Every world you hold in our territory, we will take back. Every station you built on our borders, we will destroy. Every fleet you send against us, we will annihilate. You wanted war. Now you have it. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, on Imperial worlds and neutral stations, beings watched the footage in stunned silence. The Empire's military leaders stared at the screens in disbelief. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Humans were primitives, barely more advanced than industrial-age species. How could they have weapons like this? On Vornathal, High Chancellor Vorketh slammed his fist on the arm of his throne. How? He demanded. How did they hide this from us? His intelligence advisor trembled. We underestimated them, Excellency. Our scouts reported only basic technology. We never looked deeper. We never imagined they could develop such weapons. Mobilize the core fleets, Vorketh ordered. Pull ships from every sector. I want 5,000 warships assembled and sent to crush Earth itself. We'll turn their homeworld to ash and end this rebellion before it spreads. But even as he gave the orders, Vorketh felt something he had never experienced before. Doubt. The humans had destroyed one of his fleets with ease. What if they had more surprises? What if this war wasn't the easy victory he had assumed? On the Valiant, Jake stood alone in his ready room looking at reports from New Portland. The final death toll was 38,000 civilians with another 100,000 injured. The evacuation had saved most of the population, but tens of thousands had died because the Empire wanted to send a message. Jake had sent his own message today. He hoped it was clear enough. But he knew this was just the first battle in what would be a long and bloody. Captain Nicole Barnes had been in the Earth Defense Fleet for 16 years, but she had never commanded a mission like this. Her ship, the Striker, was smaller than the Valiant, built for speed and stealth rather than heavy combat. Right now, she was leading a squadron of 6 ships deep into Imperial territory, heading for the shipyards at Telvara Prime. Telvara Prime was one of the Empire's largest construction facilities. Capable of building 50 warships simultaneously, it was heavily defended, far from human space, and according to every military doctrine Nicole had studied, completely untouchable. That was exactly why Admiral Hayes had ordered her to destroy it. 5 minutes to target, her navigator reported. Lieutenant Dan Foster was 29, born on Mars, and had steady hands even when his voice shook. Nicole checked her screens. The Telvara system had 23 defensive platforms and a garrison fleet of 60 ships. Her squadron had 6 ships and no reinforcements coming. In a straight fight, they would lose in minutes. Good thing they weren't planning a straight fight. All ships activate stealth systems, Nicole ordered. Remember the plan. We hit the shipyards, not the garrison. Get in fast. Do maximum damage, get out faster. Human stealth technology was another surprise the Empire hadn't expected. It didn't make ships invisible, but it reduced their sensor profile enough that they could get close before being detected. Combined with micro-jumps that let them appear in unexpected positions, it gave small human ships a chance against larger forces. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel on the far side of Telvara's sun, using the star's radiation to mask their approach. Then they used conventional engines to coast toward the shipyards. Passive sensors only, barely a whisper in space. The shipyards were massive, a web of construction platforms and docking facilities stretching across orbital space. Nicole could see dozens of half-built Imperial warships in various stages of completion. Destroying this facility would set back the Empire's construction capacity by months, maybe years. Target the fuel storage tanks first, Nicole ordered. Secondary targets are the fabrication platforms. We want to make sure they can't rebuild quickly. Her weapons officer, a young woman named Lieutenant Sarah Miller, armed the missiles. Ready on your command, Captain. Fire. The first the Empire knew of the attack was when 8 swarm missiles hit the fuel depot. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface, a bloom of white fire that consumed 3 storage tanks and spread to a 4th. Alarms shrieked across the facility. Ships scrambled to launch. Defense platforms powered up weapons, but the human squadron was already moving. They swept through the shipyard complex, firing as they went. Railgun rounds tore through construction platforms. Missiles destroyed fabrication facilities. In less than 10 minutes, they had crippled the largest shipyard in the sector. Garrison fleet is responding, Dan reported. 60 ships incoming, weapons hot. Time to leave, Nicole said calmly. All ships, emergency jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark. The squadron vanished, leaving the Imperial fleet to stare at the burning wreckage of their premier construction facility. Nicole allowed herself a small smile as they emerged light years away. One more blow against the Empire. One more reason for them to fear human attacks. Across Imperial space, similar attacks were happening. Commander Ryan Phillips, promoted after the battle at Korvath, led a raid on Zenthor Station, the Empire's main supply depot for their northern fleets. His 3 ships destroyed enough supplies to leave 10,000 Imperial vessels without fuel or ammunition for months. Lieutenant Katie Brooks, given her own command after proving herself at Korvath, attacked a communications relay at Nathara. Without that relay, Imperial forces in 3 sectors couldn't coordinate effectively. Every attack was surgical, devastating, and completely unexpected. The Empire had always fought wars by massing forces and overwhelming their enemies. Humans fought by striking where they were weakest, disappearing before reinforcements could arrive, and leaving chaos in their wake. On Vornathal, High Chancellor Vorketh stared at reports of attacks across his empire. In 2 weeks, humans had hit 47 targets. They had destroyed ships, stations, and facilities that had stood for centuries, and his forces couldn't seem to stop them. Where is the 5th Fleet? He demanded. I ordered them to Earth 2 weeks ago. They should have reduced that planet to rubble by now. His military commander shifted uncomfortably. The 5th Fleet never reached Earth, Excellency. Human forces ambushed them in the Kardash system. Only 30% of the fleet survived. Vorketh felt rage building inside him. 5,000 ships lost to a species he had dismissed as primitives. What about the 7th and 9th Fleets? Also intercepted and destroyed, Excellency. The humans seem to know our movements before we make them. On the Valiant, Lieutenant Chris Morgan smiled grimly at his intelligence console. The Empire didn't know that humanity had been intercepting their communications for months. Human scientists had cracked Imperial encryption codes 6 months ago. Every order the Empire sent, every fleet movement they planned, humans knew about it within hours. It was like playing chess when you could see your opponent's thoughts. And humanity was very good at chess. Captain Morrison, Chris called out. I'm picking up something interesting. There's a lot of encrypted chatter from Vornathal, highest level security protocols. Jake walked over to Chris's station. Can you break it? Already working on it. Give me 10 minutes. While Chris worked, Dr. Lisa Grant approached Jake with a tablet. Admiral Hayes wants to discuss the next phase. The Xenon Protocol. Jake had known this was coming. They had been testing the Xenon Protocol for months, but they had never deployed it in combat. It was their ultimate weapon, and using it would cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Set up a secure channel, Jake said. I'll talk to him in my ready room. Admiral Kevin Hayes looked tired. He had probably been awake for days, coordinating attacks across dozens of sectors. But his eyes were still sharp when Jake's face appeared on his screen. Jake, Kevin said, we need to talk about Draknor. Draknor was a fortress world, one of the Empire's most heavily defended planets. It had orbital weapons platforms that could destroy fleets. It had ground-based shields that could withstand nuclear bombardment. It had never been successfully attacked in the Empire's entire history. What about it? Jake asked, though he suspected he knew. The Empire is massing forces there. They're pulling back from offensive operations and consolidating their defenses. They plan to make it their stronghold, a place where they can rebuild and launch counterattacks. Kevin paused. We need to hit Draknor. We need to show them that nowhere is safe. And to do that, we need to use the Xenon Protocol. Jake was quiet for a moment. The Xenon Protocol was Dr. Lisa Grant's most terrifying creation. Self-replicating nanomachines that could dismantle any inorganic matter they encountered. Once deployed, they would consume ships, stations, weapons platforms, anything made of metal or composite materials. They would spread like a plague through the system, unstoppable and relentless. Lisa tells me the nanomachines have a lifespan of 72 hours, Jake said. After that, they break down. But during those 72 hours, they'll destroy everything. That's the idea, Kevin replied. Draknor has millions of civilians, Jake. I'm not asking you to kill them. But their military infrastructure needs to go. Can you do it? Jake thought about New Portland. About the 38,000 dead. About the Empire's threats to turn Earth to ash. When do we leave? Assemble a task force. 20 ships, including the Valiant. You have tactical command. Hit Draknor hard. Deploy the Xenon swarms and show the Empire what happens when they threaten Earth. The task force assembled over 3 days. Besides the Valiant, there was Nicole Barnes in the Striker, Ryan Phillips and his new ship, the Thunder, Katie Brooks commanding the Swift, and 16 more vessels. It was the largest human fleet ever assembled for a single target. Chris Morgan had broken the Imperial encryption. What he found made everyone on the bridge go silent. The Empire wasn't just fortifying Draknor. They were building planet-killer weapons there. Massive orbital cannons designed specifically to crack Earth's crust and boil its oceans. The Empire had decided that if they couldn't conquer humanity, they would exterminate them. How long until those weapons are operational? Jake asked. 6 weeks, Chris replied. Maybe 7? Jake looked at his crew. Then we don't have time to be subtle. We hit Draknor with everything we have. We deploy the Xenon swarms, and we make damn sure those weapons never fire. The human fleet arrived at Draknor in a coordinated jump that brought them directly into the heart of the defensive perimeter. The Imperial forces were ready this time. They had learned from previous battles. They had adapted their tactics, reinforced their shields, developed countermeasures, but they still weren't ready for what humanity brought. The battle lasted 16 hours. Ships burned on both sides. The Striker took heavy damage and had to withdraw. 2 human destroyers were destroyed completely. But the humans kept coming, kept firing, kept pushing forward. Dr. Lisa Grant watched from the Valiant Science Station as the battle raged. She had prepared the Xenon swarms personally, triple-checking every system. When Jake gave the order, she activated the deployment. Lieutenant Chris Morgan hadn't slept in 36 hours. His eyes burned as he stared at the intelligence data scrolling across his screens. What he was seeing made his blood run cold. Captain Morrison, Chris called out, his voice tight with urgency. You need to see this now. Jake was in his ready room reviewing casualty reports from the Draknor operation. They had won, but 3 ships had been destroyed and hundreds of crew were dead. Every victory had a price, and Jake felt the weight of each name on the casualty list. He stepped onto the bridge quickly when he heard Chris's tone. What is it? Chris transferred the data to the main view screen. It showed ship movements, encrypted Imperial communications that he had decoded, and trajectory calculations. The Empire is assembling a planet-killer fleet, not weapons platforms like at Draknor. Actual ships designed for one purpose, destroying Earth. The bridge went silent. Everyone stared at the screen. "How many ships?" Jake asked quietly. 300 of the largest dreadnoughts in the Imperial fleet. Each one carries enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. Together they can turn Earth into an asteroid field. Chris pulled up more data. They're assembling at the Valthera staging area. Current projections show they'll reach Earth in 96 hours. Jake felt his chest tighten. Earth. Home to 11 billion people. The birthplace of humanity. The Empire was going to destroy it, not conquer it. They were so desperate to win this war that they were willing to commit genocide. "Can we stop them?" Commander Ryan Phillips asked. 300 dreadnoughts. Even with our entire fleet, we're outnumbered more than 10 to 1. "We can't stop them directly," Jake said. He was thinking fast, running calculations in his head. "But we don't have to." "Chris, pull up the tactical map of Imperial space. Show me Vornathal." The screen changed to show the Empire's throne world. Vornathal was the heart of Imperial power, home to High Chancellor Vorketh and 40 billion citizens. It was the most heavily defended world in the galaxy, with thousands of ships in orbit and defense systems that rivaled military installations. "You want to attack their capital?" Greg Turner asked from the engineering station. "Sir, that's suicide. We'd never make it through their defenses." "We don't need to make it through," Jake replied. "We just need to make them think we will. If we threaten Vornathal, the Empire will have to pull back the planet killer fleet to defend their home. They won't risk losing their capital to save Earth." Dr. Lisa Grant stood up from her science station. "You're talking about using the Xenon protocol on Vornathal, on a world with 40 billion people." "I'm talking about threatening to use it," Jake clarified. "We deploy the swarms in orbit, activate them enough to destroy the orbital defenses, then give the Empire a choice. Recall the planet killer fleet or watch their capital world burn." The bridge erupted in arguments. Some officers thought it was brilliant. Others called it madness. A few said it was no different from what the Empire was doing to humanity. Jake raised his hand for silence. "I know what I'm asking. I know how this sounds. But think about what we're facing. If that planet killer fleet reaches Earth, everything we fought for is over. Every human colony, every ship, every person dies. The Empire wins and our species becomes extinct." He looked at each face on the bridge. "I'm not willing to let that happen. Are you?" One by one they nodded. Even those who hated the plan understood the math. Sometimes survival meant doing terrible things. "Get me a secure channel to Admiral Hayes," Jake ordered. "And start plotting a course to Vornathal. We leave in 2 hours." On Earth, Admiral Kevin Hayes listened to Jake's plan in his command center. Around him, staff officers waited for his response. Kevin was quiet for a long time, his face unreadable. "You understand what you're proposing," Kevin finally said. "If you deploy the Xenon protocol at Vornathal and they don't recall their fleet, you'll have to follow through. 40 billion lives." "I understand, sir," Jake replied. "But I don't think they'll call our bluff. Vorketh cares more about his throne than he does about Earth. He'll recall the fleet to save his capital." Kevin rubbed his eyes. He looked older than he had at the start of this war, worn down by impossible decisions and mounting casualties. "You have authorization for the operation. But Jake, if something goes wrong, if they don't back down, Earth won't survive to judge you for what happens next." "I know, sir. I'll do whatever it takes." The human fleet assembled for the assault on Vornathal was the largest they had ever fielded. 75 ships, including the Valiant, the Striker under Nicole Barnes, the Thunder under Ryan Phillips, and dozens more vessels pulled from colony defense and patrol duties. It was every combat-capable ship humanity could spare. They jumped into the Vornathal system expecting heavy resistance. They got it. The orbital defenses opened fire immediately, thousands of weapons platforms targeting the human ships. The Imperial Home Fleet, 500 strong, moved to intercept. "All ships execute attack pattern Omega," Jake ordered. "Focus fire on the defense platforms. We need to clear a path. The battle was brutal. Human ships twisted and turned through space, dodging fire while returning their own. Railguns tore through Imperial shields. Swarm missiles overwhelmed point defenses. But the Empire's numbers were telling. Human ships were taking damage, shields failing, hulls breaching. The Striker took a direct hit from a dreadnought's main cannon. Nicole Barnes felt her ship shudder, heard alarms screaming throughout every deck. "Damage report. Hull breach on decks 3 and 4. Engine power at 60%. We've lost 2 weapons banks," her engineer reported. "Keep us in the fight," Nicole ordered through gritted teeth. "We're not backing down." On the Thunder, Ryan Phillips watched 3 destroyers in his squadron get destroyed in as many minutes. The ships simply vanished in balls of fire, taking their crews with them. He wanted to break off to save his remaining ships, but he knew they couldn't. Earth's survival depended on winning this battle. Katie Brooks and the Swift led a group of smaller ships against the defense platforms, using their speed to avoid the heavy weapons while taking out the platforms one by one. It was working, but slowly. Too slowly. "Captain Morrison," Chris Morgan called out. "The Planet Killer fleet is still on course for Earth. They haven't changed direction. Our attack here isn't making them pull back." Jake's heart sank. His plan had relied on the Empire choosing to defend Vornathal over attacking Earth, but Vorketh was calling his bluff. The High Chancellor was willing to let the human fleet batter against his defenses, while the Planet Killer fleet continued toward Earth. "How long until they reach Earth?" Jake asked. 48 hours, Chris replied. Jake made his decision. "Dr. Grant, prepare to deploy the Xenon Protocol. All remaining swarms. Target every orbital defense in the system." Lisa's hands froze over her console. "Jake, if we do this, we're threatening 40 billion lives." "Are you sure?" "I'm not threatening," Jake said quietly. "I'm giving them one more chance to choose peace over destruction. If they don't take it, then we're all damned together." Lisa activated the Xenon swarms. Thousands of capsules launched from the human ships and spread throughout the Vornathal system. When they activated, the nanomachines began consuming the orbital defenses. Weapons platforms started to dissolve. Defense satellites crumbled. The mighty fortress that protected Vornathal began falling apart. Jake opened a direct channel to High Chancellor Vorketh's throne room. "This is Captain Jake Morrison. You can see what's happening to your defenses. In 1 hour, they'll be completely gone. After that, nothing will stop us from deploying the Xenon swarms on Vornathal itself. 40 billion of your people will die unless you do one thing. Recall the Planet Killer fleet heading for Earth. You have 1 hour to decide." On Vornathal's surface, Vorketh watched the human transmission with growing horror. His advisors panicked, shouting suggestions and arguments. The military commanders demanded he call the humans bluff. The civilian leaders begged him to save their world. "They won't do it," one advisor insisted. "They're not monsters. They won't kill 40 billion civilians, won't they?" Vorketh asked. "They destroyed our fleet at Korvath. They devastated Draknor. They've hit 50 targets across our empire. What makes you think they'll hesitate now?" He thought about the humans he had dismissed as primitives, about the warnings he had ignored, about the arrogance that had led him to believe the Empire was invincible, and he realized something that terrified him. The humans weren't bluffing. They would do it. They would destroy Vornathal because Earth's survival was more important to them than any moral line. The hour ticked down. 59 minutes. 58 minutes. On the Valiant, the crew watched the timer in silence. Some prayed, some just waited. Lisa Grant stood at her console, her finger hovering over the activation sequence that would doom 40 billion beings. 30 seconds left. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Vornathal," Amy Carter reported. "It's High Chancellor Vorketh." "He's broadcasting on all channels," Jake nodded. "Put it through." Vorketh appeared on screen. He looked older than he had at the start of the war. His scales dull, his forearms hanging limply. "Captain Morrison, you have won. I am ordering the Planet Killer fleet to withdraw from Earth. I am ordering all Imperial forces to cease hostilities against human." The first sign that victory had come at a terrible cost appeared 3 days after the ceasefire. Lieutenant Chris Morgan was monitoring Imperial communications when he noticed something disturbing. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy about uprisings, rebellions, and chaos spreading through Imperial territory. "Captain Morrison," Chris called out, "you need to see this." Jake was exhausted. He hadn't slept properly since the battle at Vornathal. None of them had. But he walked over to Chris's station and looked at the data. What he saw made his stomach sink. "The Empire is collapsing," Chris explained. "Species that were conquered centuries ago are declaring independence. Imperial governors are being overthrown. Civil wars are breaking out on a dozen worlds. When we broke the Empire's military power, we broke their authority everywhere." "How bad is it?" Jake asked. "Bad. The Xanthari species just declared war on the Korthan species over a border dispute that's been dormant for 200 years. The Vraxian colonies are in open rebellion. 3 former Imperial worlds have already descended into anarchy." Chris pulled up more reports. Millions are dead already. Maybe tens of millions. And it's getting worse, Jake closed his eyes. They had fought to save humanity, and they had succeeded. But in doing so, they had destabilized the entire galaxy. The Empire had been tyrannical and oppressive, but it had also maintained a kind of order. Now that order was gone, and the chaos was spreading. "Get me Admiral Hayes," Jake said quietly. On Earth, Admiral Kevin Hayes was dealing with similar reports. His command center was flooded with requests for humanitarian aid, pleas for military intervention, and demands that humanity take responsibility for the chaos it had caused. "We broke the Empire to save ourselves," Kevin told Jake over the secure channel. "But we can't just walk away from the consequences. The galaxy is burning, and like it or not, we have a responsibility to help put out the fires." "What are you suggesting, sir?" Jake asked. "The Galactic Council is calling an emergency session. Representatives from 64 species are gathering on the neutral world of Nexus Station. They want to establish a new order, a new government to replace the Empire, and they want humanity at the table." Jake felt the weight of that statement. Humanity had wanted nothing more than to be left alone, to have their sovereignty respected. Now they were being asked to help govern the galaxy. "When do we leave for Nexus Station?" Jake asked. 3 days. "I'm coming myself." "So are you and your senior officers. We're going to negotiate a peace treaty, establish new rules, and try to keep this galaxy from tearing itself apart." The journey to Nexus Station took a week. The human delegation included Admiral Kevin Hayes, Captain Jake Morrison, Dr. Lisa Grant, and several diplomats who had been preparing for this moment even during the war. They traveled aboard the Valiant, the ship that had become a symbol of human military power. When they arrived at Nexus Station, they found representatives from species humanity had never even heard of before. Some were former Imperial members, others were neutral powers. A few were species that had been conquered by the Empire centuries ago and were now free for the first time in living memory. The opening session was tense. Many species blamed humanity for the current chaos. Others wanted to ally with humanity against potential threats. Some simply feared what humans might do next. High Chancellor Vorketh was there too, no longer a chancellor but still representing what remained of imperial authority. He looked diminished, his scales dull, his movements slow. When he saw Jake, he approached cautiously. "Captain Morrison," Vorketh said. "May I speak with you?" Jake nodded, curious despite himself. They moved to a quiet corner of the station's diplomatic wing. "I underestimated you," Vorketh said. "I underestimated your species. I thought humans were weak because you were new to the galaxy, because your technology seemed primitive. I was a fool." "You were arrogant," Jake corrected. "There's a difference." "Perhaps." Vorketh was quiet for a moment. "I want you to know I never intended genocide. The Planet Killer Fleet was meant to force your surrender, not to actually destroy Earth. I thought you would back down when faced with extinction." "But you were wrong," Jake said. "Humans don't back down. Not when our survival is at stake. That's what you should have learned before you started this war." "I know that now. The entire galaxy knows that now." Vorketh looked directly at Jake. "What will humanity do with the power you've gained? Will you become the next empire? Will you conquer and subjugate as we did?" Jake thought about that question. It was one he had asked himself many times in the quiet hours of the night. "No. We fought for the right to be left alone, not for the right to rule others. We'll help rebuild what was broken, but we won't become what we fought against." The peace negotiations lasted for 3 weeks. Every species had demands. Every faction wanted concessions. There were arguments, threats, and several times the talks nearly collapsed. But slowly, painfully, an agreement took shape. The Galactic Empire would be officially dissolved. In its place would be the Galactic Federation, a coalition of equal member species with no single ruling power. Each species would have sovereignty over their own territory. Disputes would be settled through negotiation and arbitration, not military force. Humanity would have a seat on the Federation Council, equal to every other member. But more than that, humanity agreed to help stabilize regions that were descending into chaos. Human ships would patrol trade routes. Human engineers would help rebuild destroyed infrastructure. Human medical personnel would provide aid to refugee populations. Not everyone on Earth was happy with these commitments. Many argued that humanity should focus on itself, on rebuilding its own colonies and strengthening its own defenses. But Admiral Kevin Hayes made a speech that changed minds. "We fought this war because the Empire threatened our existence," Kevin said. "But we won because we were willing to do whatever it took to survive. Now we have to prove we're better than the Empire. We have to show that power doesn't have to mean oppression, that strength can be used to protect, not just to conquer. If we walk away now, the galaxy will remember us only as destroyers. Let's show them we can also be builders." The treaty was signed aboard the Valiant in a ceremony broadcast across the galaxy. Representatives from 64 species placed their marks on the document that established the Galactic Federation. When it was done, Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The war was truly over, but not everyone celebrated. Lieutenant Amy Carter approached Jake after the ceremony with troubling news. "Sir, the Federation Council is calling for an investigation into human conduct during the war. Specifically, they want to examine the Xenon Protocol and the threat made against Vornathal." Jake had known this was coming. War Crimes Tribunal? Possibly. Some species are arguing that threatening 40 billion civilians crosses a line, even in war. Others say you did what was necessary to save Earth. Jake thought about those final moments before Vornathal, about how close he had come to giving the order that would have killed billions. "Set up a meeting with the Federation investigators. I'll answer their questions. I won't hide from what I did." The investigation lasted 6 months. Jake testified about every decision he made during the war. Dr. Lisa Grant explained the Xenon Protocol in detail. Admiral Kevin Hayes defended the strategic necessity of threatening Vornathal. The hearings were broadcast across the galaxy, watched by trillions of beings. In the end, the Federation Council issued a ruling. Human actions during the war were judged to be within the bounds of self-defense, given the existential threat humanity faced. But the use of weapons like the Xenon Protocol would be strictly regulated going forward. No species would be allowed to deploy such weapons without Federation approval. Jake accepted the ruling. He understood the need for limits, for rules that prevented future wars from becoming genocidal nightmares. He also understood that he would always carry the burden of what he had been willing to do. Years passed. The galaxy slowly healed. The chaos that followed the Empire's collapse was brought under control. Trade routes reopened. New alliances formed. Species that had been enemies for centuries learned to work together. Captain Nicole Barnes retired from military service and joined the Galactic Reconstruction Initiative, helping rebuild worlds damaged by war. Commander Ryan Phillips became an instructor at the Federation Military Academy, teaching the next generation of officers about modern warfare. Lieutenant Katie Brooks remained in active service, commanding a frigate that patrolled the former Imperial border regions. Dr. Lisa Grant dedicated herself to peaceful applications of human technology. She developed medical nanomachines that could heal injuries that would have been fatal before. She created construction systems that could rebuild destroyed cities in months instead of years. She never worked on weapons again. Lieutenant Chris Morgan became humanity's chief intelligence liaison with the Federation, using his skills to track potential threats and prevent conflicts before they started. Lieutenant Amy Carter joined Earth's diplomatic corps, representing humanity in negotiations with other species. As for Jake Morrison, he resigned his commission 2 years after the war ended. He had been offered promotions, medals, positions of power. He declined them all. Instead, he joined the Galactic Reconstruction Initiative,